All right. Yeah. Stoked to be sitting down with Benji Nolo. Benji founded, directs, leads, president, I don't know, whatever, of Exodus Cry. Good to see you, man. What's happening?
Hey Lance, good to see you, brother.
Thanks so much for joining us. So we're focusing on trafficking, January being kind of anti-trafficking month. I don't know if that's a national thing or if that's a global reality. Had the privilege of sitting down and talking to a survivor that we're connected to that's actually local here in our town in our last interview. But today, yeah, what a privilege to be able to talk to you and Exodus Cry. You guys are doing a lot. You're up to a lot, but you've been in this
Yeah.
space for how many years? Like doing anti-trafficking work.
It'll be 15 years in 2 weeks.
Yeah, which feels a little OG. Like you're kind of OG. You got on this bus maybe in the early days, I'm imagining. So I feel like a lot of authority, a lot you can speak to. Why don't we just start with what you guys are up to currently? Some of Exodus Cry's kind of recent thrust. I know you guys had a really big push with the trafficking hub or porn hub campaign, and now you're in the middle of your latest documentary, Raised on Porn. You want to talk about those two things for a little bit?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, the past 15 years have gone by so fast, and I very vividly remember like just coming into this and how that felt to be learning about it and discovering it for the first time. And so it is strange to now look back and realize, man, like I've been in this for 15 years, but shout out to shout out to IJM, shout out to the Polaris Project, shout out to ICAP, um, and Lauren Bethel. And man, there's a handful of people that were back, in this space back then that I look at as the true OGs. And so
Yeah.
uh, yeah, we've come into this, to really from a heart posture of like, what can we do to make a difference?
Yeah.
And it's been cool to kind of see that journey develop. So
I love it.
yeah.
Thanks for shouting out to the true OGs. That is
Yeah.
beautiful and necessary. And were those some of the leaders that were really influencing you in the early days? Because again, there's always a learning curve. So
Yeah.
you're stepping in like, whoa, what are we doing? Were those some of the people that were kind of bigger influences on you in the early days? Or
Yeah, for sure. Like there wasn't a lot out there, at
yeah,
that time.
yep,
So Gary Haugen had written a book, The Good News About Injustice, but there really wasn't a lot about trafficking. I mean, there was like, you know, 4 articles online, something like, and I found all of them and read them 30 times, it was like that kind of thing.
totally.
And but I actually sought out those people who were out there. There's a few of them. There's like Victor Malarek, Lauren Bethel, Melissa Farley, which shout out to Melissa Farley, what a giant, what an amazing woman, what a legacy. And
Come on.
um, so I sought them out because I wanted to understand the issue, but I was also, I felt like I wanted to help tell the story. So I picked up a camera, went out, started interviewing these few handful of people that I looked up to, Don
Yeah,
Brewster, AIM, they had just started a few years before us, but so to me, but he was an
right.
OG, and it was cool because I gotta pull in the few handful of people that were out there, their perspectives, their insights, and then synthesize that into something coherent and presentable, and then release that in the form of Nefarious.
Oh man, I
So
love it.
so it was cool because like my little journey to discover this issue, I was able to then share with the whole world.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's cool. But so grateful for those people that have fought in this space for a long time. It's not an easy space to fight in, and
Yeah.
and yeah. So you as well, Lance. You've been at this for forever. So
Well, no, not definitely not forever. I mean, I'm definitely newbie on the block. I love that the conversation's going in this direction right now. So this is cool. You had a sense of calling, an encounter, the Lord spoke to you. You get out in the space, but you carry your tool, which is a camera. You're like, well, what I do as
Yeah.
or at least what you're aspiring to do is make films. I love that. Like, and
Yeah.
so it's like, you're a documentarian, you're a journalist. You're like, okay, let's just tell the stories and see where that leads.
Yeah.
And how have things unfolded over the years? Like you released Nefarious, which is, clearly a groundbreaking film and has crazy influence all over the world. I don't know how many views, if you know of. Do you even know the number of times that thing's been
Um,
viewed?
well, I mean, it's millions,
Yeah.
millions and millions. But yeah,
But yeah, the point there is like, I just bump into so many people who are like, yeah, that
yeah,
was kind of how I learned about trafficking. I didn't even know it was an issue. I watched Nefarious, and so many people enlisted into the mission from that one film. But from that one film, and I mentioned a couple of your current projects. What kind of bloomed from that one film? How did things unfold?
yeah, that's a big question. First of all, thanks. Yeah, one thing I always love about chatting with you is I feel like you really see people, and I appreciate the affirmation. So when I say you've been in this forever, I know that Justice Chip has lived in your heart for a long time. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of your heroes.
Yes.
Wilberforce. So I feel
Yes.
like that sense of camaraderie. When it comes to this space, the anti-trafficking space, um, for me, like you said, I found my lane, so to speak. And that happened, over time. But for anybody out there who's tracking with this podcast, I think, my journey is relevant to people, because really for me, what happened was I just wanted to learn as much as I could.
Okay.
I felt so ignorant, and when I was awakened to this issue, I just thought, man, like I really want to learn about what's going on and why and where, and it just, the whole thing just consumed me. And so it was going on that journey of really trying to learn and discover um, this issue, that what came up in me was a kind of like natural response of like what I felt subjectively that I could do to, lend my voice, or add value to this. And so the thing is, when people say, well, what can I do? And we get that question a lot. There's some easy answers, like you can pray, you can give, you can, help raise awareness. But really, if you want to answer that question, you have to answer it yourself. You have to
Wow.
go on the journey of reading the books, watching the documentaries, maybe doing some trips, volunteering some places. And then if that person's wired towards, law or administration or accounting or outreach to women or filmmaking or whatever it is, that thing's going to come alive. And we get testimonies all the time. Like we talk about it in our Exodus Cry chat group. Like it's constant encouragement going back and forth
Wow.
of testimonies that have come to us of people who said, I saw Nefarious and then I went to do school for this and I became, an FBI agent, or I became a therapist, or I am now doing this, started this organization in Southeast Asia, or I blah, 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 blah. And like, and so I think that, yeah, for people who are interested in really becoming more active in this space, the movement needs you. The movement needs people to become active in this space. And the journey just looks like, sit down, watch a documentary, see what comes up in your heart.
Yeah, I
Read a
love it.
book, see what comes up in your heart. So one of those books for me in the early days was The Natashas. That was a really formative book. And it was dealt with the situation in Eastern Europe. And then there was a movie that was based on that, loosely based on that book. And that movie was called The Whistleblower. And that movie is a really good narrative feature film on this. Let me just spit out some resources real quick since we're on with
Who
this.
wrote the Natashas?
Victor Malorek.
Okay.
So for people who want to learn, I encourage, go to the Exodus Cry website. We have a ton of stuff, resources that you can read there, our blog. There was prostitution research and education. Heavily recommend that website for people to go to. Rachel Morin's book is the most important book ever written, in my opinion, on this issue. It's called Paid For. And that book is just so profound. There's another one by Kaisa Ekis Ekman called Being and Being Bought. and that book is I think also like really foundational. In terms of like historical backdrop and blueprints, I really recommend Amazing Grace by Eric Metaxas on the life of William Wilberforce. And then documentaries, Lilia Forever is made by a Swedish filmmaker named Lucas Moodysson. That was really formative for me in the early days. Human Trafficking with Donald Sutherland and Mira Sorvino was very instrumental. Born into Brothels was another one back in those early days. Of course, Nefarious, we've done. And those are just a few resources right off the top of my head that I think for people who are looking to dive deeper can get into. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out.
Love it. But I love that thought. It's like at some point you have to answer the question for yourself. What can I do? I love that. It's like ownership. It's like taking responsibility for your passions, your sense of calling. And right, I mean, the learning happens by doing, the learning happens by jumping in, the learning happens by engaging versus only whatever, taking a class but I love your, read a book, watch films, like get inspired.
Yeah.
This is amazing. So a lot has unfolded since Nefarious, but you've definitely stayed consistent with, hey, we're going to tell stories. We're going to make films. That's one thing I really value and appreciate about Exodus Cry is you have such a clear focus on the prevention side of the equation. Like as you're actually penetrating culture, impacting the way we think about things. You're the first person I interacted with that really helped me deconstruct these like hypersexualized culture that we're all under the influence of, and images and media, and just, there's a reason there's such a problem with porn in our generation. So kind of what's a little current? I know I mentioned the Pornhub campaign. Do you want to talk a bit about what ended up transpiring there? That's, I don't know, I feel like a couple years old now, a year old or so.
Sure. Yeah. There's a thread there, for me, when I look back, that I think there's a thread that started with a sense of calling, and then over years of, trying to be faithful in my weakness through that, things evolving from, here to here to here to here. And now seeing the culmination of that thread resulting in like really significant breakthroughs and impact is amazing. So I can just either give a brief update on what's currently happening, or I can give that thread, whatever you think is.
Oh, I love the thread, man. The thread sounds exciting.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, I am a person of faith. I think that may mean something different to different people, even like people's conceptions of Christianity. I know that, like when Jesus came, he addressed kind of the fact that people took 10 commandments, the religious community took 10 commandments and turned them into hundreds of commandments. And Christians, we did the same thing. Jesus gave us 2 commandments and we turned them into hundreds of commandments. And so Christianity comes with a lot of baggage that I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for all that. Like Jesus said, love God and love your neighbor. And to me, like that's what my faith is about. So qualifying that, there is, I believe, spiritual forces of good and evil, of light and dark. And it was in the year 2000, I was giving a message on a Friday night or on a Saturday night about Jehu and the calling to go and to eradicate Jezebel and her influence in the country. And I gave that message because we were going to launch this thing where we would go out with my band of intercessors and we would pray around strip clubs and things like that. Just pray for God to break into these places where that influence of, sexual seduction, whatever was permeating our area. So the next day, Lou Engle calls me on the phone and he says, Chris Berglund had a dream, and it's about this there's this issue of Jezebel's influence over California. And he said, I feel like I'm on this Jehu calling, and God is inviting you to come and join me in my chariot to mobilize California to slay Jezebel. And I'm like, what? So that was, I think, like part of like where the thread started for me on this whole like issue.
Yeah.
And then during that time, like some of those years with Lou, he used to pray all the time for the mantle of William Wilberforce. And I would like join him in those prayers. I didn't know who William Wilberforce was, but when you're with Lou, he's so passionate, you know, and he's rocking and give us the mantle of Wilberforce, you know, like, and so I like joined in those prayers, and I'm like, yes, God, the mantle of Wilberforce, and like not knowing
Who is Wilberforce?
yeah, totally. After the prayer, it'd be like, I'd say to the guy next to me, like, who's Wilberforce, you know, and like Brian Kim was always like the smartest guy in the room. So I was always like asking Brian Kim like side questions, you know, to keep up, because Lou is just this prophetic whirlwind. And but then in February 3rd, 2007, it's when I learned about the issue of human trafficking for the first time. And it was crazy because that moment was really solidified in my heart as a calling when I met a survivor years later, named Christina Rangel. And when I met her, it was at this we were at this like this meeting of leaders, and everyone was saying happy birthday to her, and I said happy birthday, and then she goes, no, happy birthday to you, and I was like, oh yeah, no, it's not my birthday, but mine was back in November. And she's like, no, today's the first day that you heard about human trafficking. She goes, I heard you share that in a message once. And she goes, and I always remembered it because on February 3rd, 2007, I was in jail because I wouldn't testify against my trafficker. And I got down on my knees and I prayed that God would raise somebody up to expose this evil and justice. And it was just one of those moments where like you look back and suddenly see the sovereignty of God stretch out over your life. And it's just like very humbling and like, whoa. And then, so then that couple weeks later, February 3rd, I find out about the issue of human trafficking. 2007, a couple weeks later, Amazing Grace comes out, the movie about William Wilberforce. Really felt a sense that God is raising up a new Wilberforce movement of abolition in our day and age, to do what he did at his time, to shift mindsets and change laws around this system of oppression and exploitation. And so there's that thread for me that of like just you know, an awakening, a spiritual calling, having my burning bush moment, being set on a journey, and then going on that journey. And so we went on the journey of making Nefarious. Well, I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I say, oh, I have a background in filmmaking. I mean, that means I took some film classes. I had an interest in it. I was, you know, dropped out of film school. I'm no film expert. Like, I really did not know what I was doing, but like, we were bumbling around, you know, the world, literally the entire world, like just filming whatever we could and learning about this issue. Well, I started to see, I want to hit the pornography thread, because I started to see the overlapping reality with pornography. We'd be in red light districts, people would be passing out pornography, like marketing the girls to use them. And I started to see it on that side. And then in Southeast Asia, they were training young children by having them watch pornography, and then started to actually interview some people, some Johns, and they all had a background in porn that kind of fueled this appetite, and then interviewed people in the porn industry and could see that there was some real clear visible evidences of trafficking in the porn industry. So that theme started to emerge like as we were making Nefarious. In 2010, I had a internal audible voice of God experience, which I'm just going to keep that for myself right now, but I just to say that like there was definitely a commissioning to address this issue. And so Nefarious comes out 2011, and we you know, had no idea what was going to happen. Our people, and we've been working on it for 4 years. We've been putting out these teaser trailers that, in my mind, like, were so much more epic than what the movie would actually be, right? So like the first trip we came back from, I was so discouraged. I thought this was a complete waste of time. We have no good footage. We have no story. Like, I've wasted all these people's money who've donated to this, which, you know, was not a lot, but still. And my editor slash cameraman, you know, slash audio guy, he's played like 10 roles and I had 10 roles, and, you know, we did it together because we have a big crew. But he put this teaser trailer together. Philip Glass score. I went to go watch it. It was so epic. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I want to see that movie. He's like, you know, this is our footage. And I'm like, and that was actually part of the catalyst that made me think we should keep going with this. So we put that out, and then everybody's expecting this like epic movie. Well, the trailer comes out and we're not even done until 4 years later. So like, but we were on the hook the whole time because we released the teaser trailer. So it comes out, I have no idea. I go to our premiere in Korea, South Korea. We played at this church. Eddie Bayun is the pastor. We play Nefarious, and it's over. And I'm sitting there, and it's still, again, I'm about to have an existential crisis. What if people don't like it? Whatever, whatever. And he turns to me, he goes, that is the most powerful movie I've ever seen. Tears streaming down his face. The whole room was weeping. And it was just like, oh my God, we made something that is going to impact people's hearts. And so the screening tour took off. The movie spread virally. We ended up winning 24 film festival awards, screening before Congress, screening before parliaments all over the world. It blew open the nations to us. We had team members traveling all across Europe and Australia and Central and South America and South Africa. And like, it just sent us out to the nations. And we ended up getting consultative status at the United Nations, multiple speaking requests to speak at the United Nations. And so all that momentum really, I think, just empowered us to be able to then take the next step, which was to address this issue of the underlying factors in pornography and all that. So I can continue that thread, but I'll pause here because I know I've said a lot. So jump in. And
I think that is completely epic that you're like, oh my God, I just wasted these people's time and money. I don't even have a story. There's no way this film is going to be anything. And then it's like had this crazy impact. So what a message to all of us that are saying yes to some kind of a mission. Like it's easy to feel discouraged, even as we're in the middle of getting it done. It's like, are we even getting anything done? Well, where did that thread? So you're talking about porn and the like, it's like the seed that then grows and becomes trafficking.
yeah.
Talk about some of the discoveries you've made, some of the film projects that you guys have executed or in the middle of pulling off.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I do think talking about Pornhub is really valuable. Cool. That's like a big win for the earth when that whole thing went down.
Okay. So in 2000, I had this dream, and the dream, without going into all the details of it, basically God showed me that the strategy of Satan in our generation is to harvest the sexuality of a generation to release unprecedented realms of darkness that will be aimed at taking people out.
Wow.
And so that kind of like was like, that dream was very vivid, and it was locked into my spirit. And then I had the encounter with Lou. So that I've had this worldview now for over 20 years of seeing the way in which these malevolent forces of darkness are preying on people's sexuality, trying to harvest and colonize their sexuality to release like an intensified demonic presence in the world. Are aimed at taking people out. And it's very seductive and it's very deceptive. And I'm sure people will call me crazy for saying that, but that was definitely a part of like what was driving this for me is seeing that reality and then seeing it in the natural, as we were out filming and doing these things. And so 2012, Nefarious is now out into the world, and it was time to go back to the drawing board. So I pulled a couple colleagues together and we sat in my office, whiteboarded a bunch of stuff out. And I said, okay, here's how we're going to, address the issue of pornography. We have to look at the public health and human rights side of this. How is pornography affecting consumers, and how is it being created? How is it affecting performers, the people that are being used in it? And so we went on that journey starting in 2012, and went out and basically I went undercover into the porn industry. We read everything that's ever been written on pornography, researching. That went on for 8 years.
When
That
you say undercover in the porn industry, you mean, what do you mean? Because some people might think,
so took my,
were you a porn actor? What do you mean you went undercover?
yeah. Oh, I've got all kinds of things pinging around in my head.
Yeah.
So I took my camera and went in to just to talk with people, talk with producers, performers, agents, anybody who would talk to me to get their perspective
on the industry,
on the industry.
on the porn. Yeah. So you're doing a documentary on the porn industry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it wasn't, when I say undercover, I mean, I wasn't coming in saying like, I am from, Exodus Cry. We are here to eradicate trafficking. It was more like, I really want to just set all that aside.
Yeah.
And just go in as like a neutral figure.
Yep.
To invite them to share their perspective. Totally. And so I learned a ton through that. And
yeah, you're being a journalist, like you're going in and learning about the industry.
Yeah,
totally.
Exactly what it is. So we learned a ton through that. And then we learned a ton through everything we researched. So this went on for 8 years. And then at the beginning of 2020, my colleague Lila had dug up some stuff on Pornhub and did an investigation into their website and discovered that Pornhub was enabling and profiting from videos of real abuse and trafficking, and that the entire model for how they're distributing pornography was creating the system for that. And then obviously destroying a lot of lives and putting a lot of content out there that is very destructive. So she wrote an op-ed in the Washington Examiner in February of 2020, and that went viral. And people really resonated. It was called "It's Time to Shut Down Pornhub," and people really resonated with that because Pornhub was there's an organization, there's a company called MindGeek. They own 90% of all online pornography.
Wow.
And Pornhub is their flagship. It's the feather in their cap. It's the darling of their, whatever you want to call the jewel in their crown. So they made a lot of effort to create this, cheeky kind of pop culture brand to like mainstream and normalize pornography and make it like just acceptable, like in the culture at large. And so their brand was really big. And so when we exposed what was really going on, I think it galvanized people. Well, that resulted in launching a petition to shut them down for this. And it seemed like a David and Goliath battle, like how's, like almost laughable that we would think that we could take down this mega super predator porn giant. And but the petition went viral, got 2 million signatures. And then we created a short animated video, 2 minutes long, to tell the story about, Pornhub. And at this point, our campaign Trafficking Hub was in full swing. And so that video went viral, got 33 million views across our social platforms. And then Nick Kristof wrote an article from the New York Times, which is an expose on Pornhub. And when that happened, it got the attention of the credit card companies. They pulled out And then we made a list of demands for Pornhub, remove the download button, remove the videos that aren't verified, a bunch of other things. And they did. They deleted 80% of their website. They removed the download feature. But at this point, they were so negligent. And they were so negligent in what was happening on their site, full well knowing what was going on, and at times making jokes about it on their social media. So we wanted to destroy their brand. That was one of our objectives.
Because so much of that content was actual sexual exploitation and rape, like people literally being raped, and those videos are up on that site unverified, and the victims in those videos are now having to relive that moment for who knows how long, right?
Exactly.
It's a big piece of the story. It's crazy to me.
So we really wanted to expose the deeper truth about what was going on Pornhub in a way that would completely destroy their brand, because they tried to present themselves as this harmless, cheeky, and it was all just a bunch of BS. Like they're a criminal enterprise. Their website was infested with videos of real abuse, and that's criminal. And so we wanted to hold them accountable, see them shut down, hold their executives accountable. So that happened, and now there are a series of lawsuits against MindGeek and Pornhub, and the movement is continuing to move forward. And we had, I'm talking about it from our perspective.
Sure.
When we began to form and shape the Trafficking Hub, but there's been a lot of other organizations that have come on board, and it's being carried by the movement now. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation has been a huge ally in this, many others. And so that is still going forward, but we also want to address the public health crisis of porn. So we launched a new campaign this year called Protect Children, Not Porn. And that campaign is focused, we're through the campaign, we are insisting and demanding that big tech and big porn be required to put age verification walls around the hosting and distribution of all pornographic content, so that so that there can't be any unwitting exposure by children, which is how most kids most kids are online, and there's unwitting exposure where it comes trespassing into their lives, and for many of them turns into a lifelong addiction, creates all kinds of deviant ideas around sex. It's just so destructive. And so why haven't those walls been in place? It boggles the mind. And so this campaign, Protect Children Not Porn, is insisting on that. We released a documentary in conjunction with that in the fall, a couple months ago, called Raised on Porn. And that is available on a Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel. It already has 1 million views. We're getting tons of traction and positive feedback through that. So really encourage people to check that out. So now,
what are you guys discovering with that film going out? Like some of the stories about how being raised on porn has left a mark, like not the film, but people's journeys. Like porn entered their land, and now as a result, the kind of, you mentioned deviancy, you mentioned malevolent, like it's just so destructive. And any kind of stories you can share? Because I'm 50. I grew up. It's like porn was like part of my rite of passage. It's like, oh, it's all good. Like that's just part of becoming a man. And yet we know, with the great education and awareness that's going on in the land today, organizations like yourself, Fight the New Drug. It's like, no, porn is not innocent.
Yeah.
Porn is so destructive. So some of the stories that you guys have discovered in making the film.
Yeah. Well, so the film, I won't give those stories away because I want people to go see the film. It's only 37 minutes long, and it is first person stories, but also combined with professional interviews and animation and cinematic reenactments. I feel like it's a very compelling viewing experience, and we've got a lot of feedback to that end. But I will say this, we have had hundreds of people contact us with their stories, hundreds and hundreds of people. Like we're sitting on a stockpile of stories from people about how porn affected them and their life, or and a lot of people how the film affected them as well. And so the truth, the reality of what we're discovering is that, yeah, porn is not innocuous or whatever. It's not harmless. It's that it is having an effect on people's lives. And some of the feedback that we've gotten with the film is that people feeling set free from porn addiction after seeing it, just realizing kind of the bigger picture realities at work. And so yeah, I think it's great for parents, it's great for porn consumers, everyone out there. The film is very accessible. So with so
So
then
Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So then this year we are going to be starting a new campaign, which we'll announce at a later date, focusing specifically on some issues within the porn industry itself. And
Okay.
we're releasing a documentary on the porn industry called Beyond Fantasy, and that will happen this spring. And so we're getting ramped up for the third kind of wave, if you will. And so, each of these campaigns, Trafficking Hub, Protect Children, Not Porn, and this next campaign are targeting very specific things where we want to make a tangible difference in bringing about change, concretizing that change through law to actually fundamentally reconfigure and shape the entire world as it relates to pornography.
Yeah.
To create safety for future generations. I say this not in a grandiose way. I don't say that as a gimmicky kind of like, we're going to change the world. I'm speaking about that literally, analytically.
Yeah.
And so, pornography is relatively new to our world. I shouldn't say pornography is relatively new. The internet is relatively new to our world, and the version of pornography that came with the internet. And so I think that right now we're in a moment where, regardless of where you are on this, like people on the other side, it's just stop. It's like, stop pretending like this isn't an issue. Just stop. Like, I think it's important collectively, we as good human beings, on this side or on that side, on this political spectrum, that have to take a step back and look at the empirical evidence of how pornography is harming our world, harming our children, and collectively come up with a solution to address this.
Yeah.
And so I think, looking at, how the internet came about and how, we're still in this short time span where it's relatively new, and what it's done is it's created a city without walls. And there are no protections for children online, and it just should not be that way. And I think collectively, we as a society have to come to a place where we agree that the safety, protection, and well-being of our children is more important than the convenience and gratuitous sexual appetites of adults and the profits of these major big tech and big porn companies.
Yeah.
Can we agree on that? Like, if we can't agree on that, then our society is in deep trouble. And so I think that the changes that we are talking about employing through the distribution model that Trafficking Hub addresses, where you can't just upload any like there has to be a verification system in place, third-party moderation verification system in place, right? So the distribution side would fundamentally alter the way that pornography is able to be distributed. The age verification walls would fundamentally alter the way that porn is able to be distributed. And then this next campaign that we have coming will address a very significant third component in this. So these campaigns together, what we are talking about is driving for embedded change that will shift the tectonic plates in the world as it pertains to pornography in order to create a safer world for children. And I just can't stress that enough. This is about the next generation. From the time we hit 18, we all have to be thinking about the next generation. Every choice that we make in life is casting our vote for the world that we want our kids to inherit. And so it's not about me. It's not about my generation. This is all about the next generation and the world we want our kids to inherit. And so
When you say this version of pornography, the internet, the advent of the internet, it's a new day. Porn's been around a long time, and yet you make the statement, this version of pornography. What is this version of pornography?
So I think that there are two key moments historically where pornography advanced and had a correlating sociological impact on our world, and actually changed the entire consciousness of our planet, in my opinion, for the worse. So the first of those two events was the launch of Playboy magazine in 1952 by Hugh Hefner.
Okay.
When he launched Playboy in 1952, at the end of 1952, he had 53,000 copies that sold out in a couple of weeks. He did not even put a issue number or date on the cover of the magazine because he had no idea if there would even be a second one, but it was an instant hit. And what happened in that moment is that pornography went from the back street to the main street.
Mm-hmm.
Pornography went from something that was relatively obscure and stigmatized to something that was popular, mainstream, and accepted. And so there was the normalization at that point of pornography and the worldview specifically embodied within that by Hefner himself. And that was a worldview that saw women as sexual objects. He said this himself. Somebody asked him, well, what about the fact that you're objectifying these women? He said, well, they are sexual objects. So that is straight from the horse's mouth. He's views women as sexual objects. So that objectifying way of casting women in our society, I think, dehumanizes them and causes us not to see them as full three-dimensional beings, but as these two-dimensional objects who essentially find their value in one thing, which is their sex appeal. So it changed the consciousness of our world because now there was a business incentive to capture the lustful gaze of men. He corporatized and industrialized lust. He created an industry out of, putting out, highly objectified, hypersexualized images of women. So this brought about the normalization of pornography, the objectification of women, and the acceptance of men viewing women through this lustful two-dimensional gaze. And so it really began to make that relationship more transactional and less human, and began to elevate sex above every other way of connecting, that in like a healthy way. So that was the first installment. The second installment was with the internet. And what happened with the internet was, so Hefner brought about the normalization of the objectification and hypersexualization of female bodies. The internet brought about the normalization of the most violent, dehumanizing, degrading, humiliating, and deviant sexual acts imaginable. And so
what's the most popular sort of porn that people are viewing nowadays?
So there's, the genres, they're always fluctuating in what's most popular this month versus that month. And that's because pornography is novelty based. And so you constantly need something new and different to stay engaged and aroused. But historically, the two most popular are the violent genre, the genre that is gangbangs, that is choking, that is a lot of other really graphic things, which I don't really care to talk about in this context, but our documentary will get into. And then there's the barely legal genre. And the barely legal genre is 18-year-old girls, 19-year-old girls depicted as though they're 10 or 11, pigtails, lollipops, calling their abuser in the video daddy, all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's important to see pornography's like connection to the evolution of our sexuality
Mm,
through the normalization of these deviant acts. And so that's when I talk about this version of sexuality or pornography with the internet, that's what I'm speaking to, is it was a nuclear explosion that had a mushroom cloud that spread across the entire planet, that the nuclear kind of like wave like went shoom and sent out this sexuality that encompassed the globe and now has set fire to a generation where you have young teenagers wanting to get choked out at 14 in their first sexual experience, or their first sexual experience is having a gangbang, or their first sexual experience is having anal sex. You know, it's stuff that is derived directly from pornography. There was a book written by Charlize Azam called Oral Sex is the New Goodnight Kiss, and where young girls will be pressured into giving oral sex before they've even had a kiss with this person. And so it's having a profound impact, like I said, on our consciousness,
mhm.
as well as like our sexuality.
Yeah.
And so taking an inventory of that, acknowledging that, recognizing that, and building a plan to address it is one of the most responsible things that we can do as human beings, adults living in our generation. The failure to do so would be a catastrophic failure of showing responsibility for the protection of our children in the next generation. Like, this is our problem. We inherited the internet. We have to deal with it. And so, yeah.
And then obviously that's fueling the sex trade. So that whole machine is what creates a demand for sex for sale, where trafficking actually takes place. So women are exploited, trapped, coerced into a life of sex for sale. And the whole idea of like, well, they want to be there. It's like, there's a lot to say there. But I don't know how many people understand. It's a very simple connection. Your porn habit actually fuels the sex industry, which is the engine for trafficking and exploitation. And when people understand that, like, oh wow, my porn habit is contributing to this, that is extremely transformational. Like, that is shifting culture, and then going way upstream and thinking about the way we look at particular images and society and films we watch and music we listen to. And yeah, again, I just think the work that you guys are caught up in is profound. It's very necessary. It's
Yeah.
rewiring. I mean, it's rewiring the brains and the consciousness of so many of us. So
Yeah.
thanks for what you're doing. Keep it up. So Raised on Porn, you can see that over at Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube. You guys are moving towards some other films. You mentioned Beyond Fantasy.
Mhm.
That's really just a documentary on the porn industry. So it's kind of
Yep.
getting behind the curtain and seeing how the porn industry actually works. Anything else you'd like to mention there? Or?
So let me just give a snapshot of the upcoming year. So
Yep.
Raised on Porn quantifies the impact on pornography on consumers. The story is told through first person interviews as well as professionals. And we get all into the neurology and everything. And I really encourage people to check that out. Then we are releasing Liberated after spring break. That comes out next month. And that is a follow-up to our Netflix documentary, Liberated, the New Sexual Revolution. It's a 4-part series that we're releasing. That's a follow-up to that. And that will also be available on our Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel. So if anyone saw Liberated, the New Sexual Revolution, that's on hookup culture and the culture of sexual violation. And so this follow-up comes out next month. We're excited about that. Then in the spring, in March, April, we release Beyond Fantasy. That is our documentary on the porn industry. And that's a 3-part series. And that will also be available on our Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Then in the fall, we release Entering Pornland. And that is a documentary that is the individual stories of people who went into the porn industry and their whole journey. And that is an 8-part series that will also be available on our Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel. So we'll be releasing, and there's a couple other projects I'm leaving out, but we'll be releasing more content this year than we have in our previous 14 years combined.
Wow.
And so this is a great time for people to get connected with Exodus Cry. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, subscribe and hit the notification bell on our YouTube channel for Exodus Cry and Magic Lantern Pictures, because we have a lot of exciting things happening, these campaigns launching, and these films coming out.
And the traction of those films ultimately, I mean, I know you could say a lot would influence this, but I'm imagining that the traction of those films has a big bearing on any sort of legislative processes or projects or initiatives, right? Like the bigger the footprint with the films, the easier it is to get some influence
Exactly.
at that law level or legislative level.
That's exactly right. We start
Okay.
at the grassroots level, and
Yeah.
the degree to which we get participation, it puts pressure all the way up. And that's exactly what happened with Trafficking Hub. And that's exactly what we need to have happen with these other campaigns.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, I mean, I don't know. I'm not in it at the level you are. I'm encouraged. I think eyes are opening. I think people are waking up. Yeah, I do think people are like, hey, don't touch my sex. But I think a lot of people are starting to get the message, connecting the dots, like, wait, this isn't healthy.
Yeah.
And when you start highlighting children, I mean, I love that what happened, the blowback with that one professor that started trying to define pedophilia as another kind of orientation and that it's okay. And how people actually rallied and were like, no, not on our watch.
Yeah.
That was a good sign.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot more work to be done, but well, keep up the good work, man. Thank you guys for what you're doing. So Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel sounds like that's really the key point of connection for everything Exodus Cry is doing these days. But you have YouTube, or I'm sorry, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, you also have a website.
Let me ask this one favor for people to please go to our IMDb page for Raised on Porn and rate and review. It'll take literally 2 minutes.
How do people do that? Like, what do people do there?
So if you just type in Raised on Porn, our IMDb page will pop right up on Google. That's where films are listed and you can rate and review them. And it does help add credibility to the film when people do that. So we're giving these away for free. We actually have Nefarious, our first documentary, that's on our Exodus Cry YouTube channel. We're giving that away for free now. That's up on YouTube. So we're giving this stuff away for free. All we ask is for people who are tracking with us, please rate and review it on IMDb and share it with your friends. We have a bunch of films on Exodus Cry YouTube channel and a bunch of films on Magic Lantern Pictures YouTube channel. It's all for people to get educated, resourced, informed, and we've done the work for you. And yeah, check it out.
Easy to do. I'm sure a lot of people are doing that. You said Raised on Porn already has 1 million views.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep that groundswell moving. I'm going to land this. Benji, thanks for giving us some time. Really, really good to hear your guys' story. Thank you for everything you guys are caught up in. Keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance.
However we can support you guys. And thank you guys for joining us today. It's always good to be having these conversations. Again, we say it over and over again, get involved. The world is run by those who show up. So excited to hear about your guys' passion, the things that you guys are turning on to engage in and make a difference. Make sure you click that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Share these interviews if they're actually leaving a mark for you. I think the more we're able to share these kinds of stories and interactions, the bigger the groundswell. So appreciate you all. God bless you. See you soon. Thanks, Benji.
Thanks, brother.